Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. And talk about the most recently vacated SEC head coaching job, that of the Auburn Tigers. Okay, so if you listen to this show, if you listen to this pod, Sunday morning, we sort of reacted to Auburn losing to Kentucky, kind of knowing that the Hugh Freeze stuff was probably coming later in the day. Well, the Hugh Freeze stuff did come later in the day. We reacted once I got to Vegas. We did it live from Circus Sportsbook. And it's certainly been an eventful couple days at Auburn, okay? So Auburn fires Hugh Freeze on Sunday. DJ Durkin named the interim head coach. And, we talked a lot about we talked about it a lot on Sunday shows, on Tuesday's show, when we talked about the Hugh Freeze golf story, which was crazy. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens next at Auburn. Now, I've said this since before Hugh Freeze even got fired. I think DJ Durkin has a legitimate chance to get that head coaching job. You look at some of these other interim head coaches, Billy Gonzalez at Florida. I was basically told Billy Gonzalez has already thanked the support staff and the GAs and everybody as far as hey, I'm not going to be here much longer. I wish you guys the best in your journey. Billy Gonzalez was not hired to hopefully become the full-time head coach. The same with the Penn State interim. I think Frank Wilson, I would argue much the same at LSU. But I would say that if DJ Durkin does what he may be capable of doing, I actually think Auburn wants to keep him, right? Because the players love him. I think the fans have gotten behind him because of this defense. And so, listen, he's got work to do. He's got to beat Vandy this weekend. I think there's no doubt about that. You certainly have to beat Mercer. And then I think, depending on how the Alabama game goes, I think there's an argument that you just keep him and you don't go into the coaching candidate pool. Well, I bring it up because at the same time, if Auburn hires from outside, one, I would certainly try to keep DJ Durkin as your DC. That's another conversation for another day. But two, there's been an interesting conversation, I think, the last couple days about what is the Auburn head coaching job and who are realistic candidates and who aren't. Okay. So first of all, as far as what is the Auburn coaching job, listen, I'll let every fan base that has an open job thinks their job is amazing and everybody should want to come there and they're going to get the best candidate available. Okay. But I do think the narrative around Auburn specifically is very interesting because there hasn't been, there's been a lot of turnover from Gus Malzahn to Brian Harsin to now Hugh Freeze and whoever's next. There clearly has been a lot of turnover. Okay. But the counter to that is there is some recent history of success. I saw Peter Burns from the SEC Network say he believes this is actually the best SEC opening. I don't know that I agree with him, but there's certainly a lot that Auburn has to offer. Great recruiting base, kind of in that part of the country, not far from Atlanta, et cetera, Alabama as well. The facilities, the money, we know NIL is where it needs to be. The other thing that I think we underestimate, there's better recent history than people realize, okay? So David Pollack, formerly of ESPN, does a great job. He's a former Georgia Bulldog, okay? So Georgia Bulldogs aren't keen to Auburn Tigers, but he put out a tweet earlier this week that caught my attention praising Auburn and its recent history. David Pollack saying, quote, "The list of teams that have played for at least 2 national championships in the last 15 years are as follows: Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, LSU, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Auburn." I ain't hearing that Auburn ain't a special place, okay? So first of all, I give David Pollack credit. I mean, when you actually contextualize it like that, you're like, oh, crap. Last 15 years, only, 7 or 8 schools have done it, and it's the biggest brands in the sport. It's Ohio State, Notre Dame, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, etc. There's a lot of big-name brands that are not in that mix: Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Florida State, Miami. But you know who is in it? The Auburn Tigers. And I think, by the way, that to me is especially relevant because 15 years, what's significant about that is that it's basically the lifetime of all the high school players that you're recruiting, right? So you go back and it's like Florida was great in the 90s. To a kid that's in high school right now, the 90s might as well be the 50s. Like the way that you and I think of Army in the 40s is the way that a 15-year-old high school sophomore thinks about Florida in the 1990s. Like it's just the truth, right? Even Florida's recent national championships under Urban Meyer came, frankly, before a lot of these current high school players were born. But they all remember, Auburn playing probably at least in that 2014 national championship game against Florida State. They remember the 2017 team that played in an SEC title game, beat Alabama and Georgia. And so there is some context that does matter. So I think now the question becomes, if it isn't going to be DJ Durkin, who are the realistic candidates? And maybe more than who are the realistic candidates, like if you're an Auburn fan, who should you be shooting for as your next head coach? Not like we could get this guy. It's like, oh, this is a guy that maybe isn't on our radar, but should be. And to go back to David Pollack, I thought he brought up an interesting candidate on his show talking about Auburn, okay? So David Pollack, talking about the Auburn coaching job, was talking about a few different candidates, but he said, quote, about one candidate in specific, does anyone else think that Kenny Dillingham would be great? Kenny Dillingham, like Jeff Brom, is at his alma mater. Would he leave? I don't know. Probably not. But if you're going to go to Auburn and have consistent resources, that is a good job to consistently have resources. That was from David Pollack on his podcast. Let me say this. I think it is a very interesting name. And I think there are a lot of reasons to think that maybe, just maybe, Kenny Dillingham would consider the Auburn job. And I think there are some reasons to think that maybe Kenny Dillingham would not consider the Auburn job. So let's go ahead and get in. First off, as far as why he would not, because I think that's probably a fair place to start. It is worth noting he is from Arizona. He's from the Scottsdale. For people who have never been to Arizona, Tempe, Scottsdale, Phoenix are all in that same kind of area. So Tempe is where Arizona State is. I think he's technically from Scottsdale. They're all within a 20-minute drive of each other. So he's from Arizona. He's an Arizona State alum. And he's been pretty vocal about yeah, this is basically sort of my dream job. Like when he was an assistant coming up, it was well known in football circles. If Arizona State opens up, Kenny Dillingham, this hotshot young coordinator, is going to be angling for that job. And he believes that he can build Arizona State into its own power, the way that, Oregon has been built into a power, the way that other schools have in recent years, et cetera. Clemson, I know Arizona State doesn't have the history of Clemson, but, kind of that kind of model. So it's going to be hard to get him away. And I think, by the way, broader conversation about most of the good candidates this year, it's weird how many of them are at their alma maters. So like Jeff Brom, I don't know that I would have ever believed he was going to leave Louisville. But if, Penn State or Florida or somebody offers him 10 years, $100 million, and it's a better job, he's probably got to listen. Same with Brent Key at Georgia Tech, who is a Georgia Tech alum. So I bring it up because it's not going to be ready. It's not going to be easy to get any of these guys away from their alma maters. But I would also add, if they're going to do it, there's a lot of reasons to be intrigued, especially at a place like Auburn, especially if you're Kenny Dillingham. First of all, Kenny Dillingham, it's worth noting, I think part of the reason I would assume that David Pollack put Kenny Dillingham's name out there. Kenny Dillingham did coach at Auburn during the Gus Malzahn era. So he's familiar with the job. But then I also think there's a lot of pluses at Auburn that Arizona State simply can't offer. Okay. And I think this is going to be an interesting conversation as we get deeper into this NIL portal era. Yes, we have a Big Four, a Power Four conferences, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and ACC. But I think we also know within that hierarchy, there are just certain jobs that are better resourced and in better position to succeed than others. And especially virtually every SEC job is virtually better than every, Big 12-ish type job and ACC as well. Now, there are individual jobs that are really good. Texas Tech has everything you need to compete. I think BYU low-key has everything you need to compete. They obviously have the honor code. It's a little bit different, but I think both football and basketball have done a good job of saying, hey, if you come here and you abide by the honor code, and you ball out, you're going to have no issues with the NFL because the NFL is going to realize that whatever. You get the point. The point I'm trying to make, there are good jobs individually outside of the Big Ten and the SEC. I don't know that I'd put Arizona State there because the bottom line is as good as Arizona State was last year, and as awesome as it was to see them win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff, it really is kind of an uphill battle, right? And you look at Arizona State, listen, I've been to Arizona, I've been to Scottsdale, I've been to Tempe, beautiful area. I just don't know that it's ever going to be the place that you are going to have this war chest of NIL money at your disposal, right? First of all, I'll say this: behind the scenes, ASU is kind of a dysfunctional school. The school president doesn't care about sports. Bobby Hurley, the basketball coach, probably should have been fired like 4 years ago, and he just keeps not getting fired. They do have a new AD. But like even in the rev share era where schools are now paying, a good chunk of money for NIL, I just don't know that if you have to raise money outside of what the schools can afford to pay, that Arizona State is a place that people are lining up to give money even to a winner. Now, maybe, listen, if you do it over a 2, 5, 10-year stretch, maybe it's a little bit different in 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever. But I just don't think it's that easy. And I think it's always going to be a disadvantage at Arizona State. And I think all you got to do is look at the last 2 years, right? You look at Arizona State. Listen, last year was unbelievable. Picked to finish 16th in the Big 12 preseason poll. They win the Big 12, go to the college football playoff. And we talked about it earlier with the Sark conversation. They were a team that very much could have advanced to the college football playoff semifinals if they had gotten a few calls that should have gone their way, okay? But at the same time, like, look at how they got there. Little bit, fluky is not the right word, but it was really, how do I put it delicately? Like, they did an unbelievable job in evaluating. They did an unbelievable job in retaining the right guys. And all the stars kind of aligned, right? Cam Scadaboo's this dude from Sacramento State that nobody else is really recruiting when he hits the portal. He ends up with you. He's awesome. It is clearly translated to the NFL. I know he's out for the year. It's disappointing, but he was awesome for you last year. Sam Levitt, your quarterback, a guy that you had a relationship with, you believed in, who also got ran out at Michigan State by the previous coaching staff. Jordan Tyson, your best wide receiver, was a player that was at Colorado. Colorado has a coaching change. Deion comes. I'm bringing my own luggage. It's a Louis. And Jordan Tyson ends up with you at Arizona State. So they had to catch a lot of breaks. It's not like Georgia. It's not like Florida. It's frankly not like Auburn, where you can, like, whatever you want to criticize Hugh Freeze about, he built a college football playoff caliber roster, mostly out of high school development and retention. I don't know that you can do that at Arizona State. You can find diamonds in the rough. You can develop guys, but one, can you find enough of them? And then two, if you find enough of them, can you retain them, right? I mean, that's the big thing. Like, again, say what you want about Auburn, but if they get the right coach, they have a lot of NFL talent and they're going to be able to retain all of them. And it's the same, by the way, at Georgia, at Texas A&M. I don't know that it's the same at Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham said this during their college football playoff run last year. He was one of the ones that was vocal about, like, yeah, we got guys being recruited off my roster right now. I know what their offers are, and I've told them once we're done, you should take that offer and get out of here because we can't afford to give you that. And so, we had John Summerall on this podcast a few weeks ago. By the way, Auburn fans, you should check that one out. But in the process, John Summerall kind of referenced, hey, we're all kind of playing Moneyball at the group of 5 level. And it's kind of the same at Arizona State. Like, it's kind of Moneyball, right? You have to find value in places that other people don't see it. You have to develop. You have to hope that players will take less money to stay. And that's just a tough place to live, right? That's a tough place to be. And that's one thing you don't have to worry about at Auburn, at Texas, at Ohio State, at Michigan. If you have good players and they're balling out and other people are offering them stuff, you could just write a blank check and say, what are they offering you? We'll match it. And that's just never the way it's going to be at Arizona State. And so to me, that's what I believe kind of sort of makes Kenny Dillingham an interesting candidate at Auburn, where maybe it's not this year where he leaves. Maybe it's next year. Maybe it's the year after. By the way, maybe it's not. Maybe it's none of it. Maybe he stays forever, or maybe last year was the one great year and it never gets back to that. But I just think it's one of those deals where at some point it is going to be so tough for him to say, I want to stay, because again, you go back to last year versus this year, you're seeing how thin how narrow the margins are, and how many, luck is the wrong word, but how many breaks you have to have along the way. Sam Levitt was awesome last year. He gets hurt. You don't have Cam Scadaboo. A couple other injuries. All of a sudden, you're sitting here at 6-3. He even said Arizona State's actually on the bye this week. And he actually said coming into the week, he said, I gave my guys a bunch of time off because they need it. It's been an exhausting season. So it's just something to think about. I'm not saying he's the number one candidate, and I'm not saying he's leaving. But I do think increasingly, as we get deeper into this rev share NIL era, I think it's probably a call that you're going to have to take. Maybe it's not this year with Auburn. Maybe it's next year when the next big job, SEC job opens. Maybe it's 2 years after that when a monster Big Ten job opens. And by the way, it doesn't just apply to him. I love Louisville, love Jeff Brom, think he wants to stay there forever. But if Florida offers him a 10-year, $100 million contract with all the recruits he'll have access to, it's a call he's probably got to take. Same with Brent Key, same with Kenny Dillingham. Interesting conversation, but David Pollack thinks you got to break the bank for the coach who just made the college football playoff last year.